I am Tessa Bledsoe, a 30-years-old woman. I work in marine biology and live just outside Savannah, Georgia. 3 years ago, I was declared dead, officially, legally, publicly, but I was very much alive. And when I found out my own sister faked my death to claim $610,000 in life insurance, what happened next changed everything. The last time I breathed without suspicion was in the middle of the Indian Ocean. We were on day 173 of a coral health research mission off the Seychelles coast. The days blurred together in heat and salt and sun, but I loved it. Out there, time was measured by tide shifts and dive logs. There was no reception, no bills, no buzzing phones, just the deep hum of the ocean and the quiet joy of doing work that mattered. I was 30 and I thought I'd finally found peace. Most nights I'd fall asleep to the low thrum of the boat engine, the scent of salt clinging to my skin, thinking of home, of Georgia, of my little blue cabin just outside Savannah, of my mom's porch and her iced tea, and sometimes when the night got still, I'd think of my sister, Riley. Riley with her quick wit and quicker lies. Riley who always knew how to land on her feet even when everyone else hit the concrete. She was 3 years older than me, sharper, brasher, louder. We grew up tangled not in harmony but in friction. If I was the calm, she was the storm. Still, she was my sister. She'd helped raise me after our dad left, took me to the mall, taught me how to pluck my eyebrows, smoked in the bathroom window while warning me about boys who lied. "Stick to science, Tess," she used to say. "Let me handle the scams." She laughed when she said it, I laughed too. But it doesn't feel funny now. The mission ended in April. I flew to London, then JFK, then finally Atlanta. It was a mess of long layovers and customs checks. When I finally got behind the wheel of my rental car, I was running on 2 hours of sleep and 3 cups of airport coffee. The drive home was familiar: red clay shoulders, pine tree canopies, gas stations I used to sneak snacks from as a teenager. I remember turning onto the gravel road that led to my property, a smile spreading across my face. But as I pulled in, something stopped me. The mailbox was gone. At first, I thought maybe it had been knocked down, but no, it was just gone, dug out of the ground like it never existed. My house looked wrong too. The shutters were painted over in a beige I never chose. My porch was boarded up with plywood. A paper stapled to the wooden post fluttered in the breeze. I got out of the car slowly, the dust kicking up around my sandals. I reached for the paper. Property seized, probate court order filed. Probate? I blinked, rereading the words. Seized. I backed up, called Riley. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. I drove to Mom's place. She hadn't been answering my emails either, but she'd always been bad about tech. I figured maybe she just hadn't checked lately. Her house was empty. Not just unoccupied, emptied. Curtains gone, no car, no rocking chair on the porch, just dead leaves gathering in the corners. A neighbor stepped out as I stood there, frozen in the driveway. She was in her 60s, red visor, gardening gloves on. She stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. "Tessa," she said, her voice trembled. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She dropped her shears. Oh my God, oh my God. She ran to me, clutched my arms like she thought I'd disappear. "You're alive." My stomach twisted. Why wouldn't I be? She started crying. "Riley said you were gone, that you drowned off the coast of Africa, that they couldn't bring your body back." Everything inside me went still. I barely remember what happened next. I think she made me sit. I think she gave me water. I think she showed me an article on her phone, an obituary. Tessa Ann Bledsoe, 30, marine biologist, free spirit, beloved sister, taken too soon doing what she loved. There was a photo, me in my college cap and gown, squinting against the sun. There were quotes: "She always wanted to make the world a better place." There were donations requested in lieu of flowers. I threw up in the bushes. I called Riley again, left a message I don't even remember, drove straight to the courthouse in downtown Savannah, hands trembling on the wheel, heart racing like it wanted to punch its way out of my chest. I told the clerk I needed to see the probate records for the estate of Tessa Bledsoe. She looked at me like I was insane. "Ma'am, that estate has already been settled, closed 3 weeks ago." "I am Tessa Bledsoe." She blinked. "Excuse me. I'm not dead." She stood up and left the desk. came back with a supervisor, then another. I showed them my ID, my passport, my ticket stubs, my signed journal from the mission. More blinking. More whispers. Eventually, they found the file. Filed by Riley Bledsoe, death certificate included, filed October 17th. Cause of death, accidental drowning. Place of death, Seychelles. Body, unrecoverable. Confirmation, employer letter from Marinex Research Corp. Except Marinex didn't exist. I showed them my contract with a real company, my badge, my supervisor's name. By the time I walked out of that building, it was past sunset. I sat in my rental car, watching the street lamps buzz on, listening to the silence stretch around me. My phone buzzed. Blocked number. A voicemail. I hit play. Riley's voice, calm, too calm. Tessa, I didn't think you'd come back. Don't do anything stupid. I didn't hurt anyone. I just took what I needed. You were gone. You can be gone again. Don't make this worse. I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking too hard to pick it up. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in Harper's guest room, staring at the ceiling fan, counting the shadows as they spun around me. Because the truth was sinking in now. My sister had declared me dead. Filed legal paperwork. Staged an obituary. Collected a $610,000 life insurance payout. And walked away. While I was halfway around the world studying coral reefs and believing, naively, stupidly, that the people who loved me were waiting for me to come home. But Riley wasn't waiting. She was replacing. And if she thought I was going to disappear again, she didn't know me at all. The next morning, I stood in front of the courthouse again. Same bricks, same sun rising over the columns, but this time I wasn't just stunned, I was angry. No, furious. That voicemail from Riley kept replaying in my mind. You were gone, you can be gone again. Like I was some old photograph to tuck away in a drawer. Like I hadn't fought to build my life piece by piece, grant by grant, dive by dive, year after year of silent work while she played her games in the shadows. Not anymore. I pushed open the door to the county clerk's office, marched past the stairs, and slammed my ID on the counter. I need to file a motion to vacate a fraudulent death certificate. The clerk, same woman from yesterday, blinked. Ma'am, we're going to need formal documentation. I have it. I laid it out like cards at a poker table, my signed expedition contract, travel logs, time-stamped photos from the research vessel, notarized testimony from my supervisor, flight records, my passport. All of it screamed one truth. I am alive. She called in a supervisor, then a judge, then a notary. I gave a statement under oath, every word burned coming out not from shame but from the sheer disbelief that I had to prove I was real. They told me they'd open an investigation. I said, you better make it quick, she's cashing in everything. The judge, a gray-haired man with tired eyes, studied me carefully. You understand how rare this is, right? I'm living it, I said. They gave me temporary paperwork, a signed affidavit confirming my legal status as alive pending reinstatement. It was a start. Next, the bank. That afternoon, I walked into my branch, the same one I opened an account at after college. The same woman, Sharon, was at the counter. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Tessa. Yep, I said, forcing a tight smile. It's me. But I thought. I know what you thought. I need to access my accounts. She hesitated, then led me to her office. I handed her the affidavit and ID. She looked torn between fear and relief. You should know your accounts were closed, transferred. Riley had power of attorney. She faked my death, Sharon. A pause. I'm so sorry, she whispered. She printed out the transaction history. My jaw clenched. Within 3 weeks of filing the claim, Riley had liquidated every account, sold my stocks, cashed my savings bonds, took control of my mortgage, and sold the property. All under my name. She moved the money to 3 new banks, all registered under her LLC, Bledsoe Care Foundation. A charity, I scoffed. She claimed it was for grieving families, Sharon said. I laughed then, a raw, bitter sound that made her flinch. Later that day, I sat with Harper on her porch, sifting through the paperwork. She created a fake nonprofit, I muttered, filed the death certificate, used a forged letter from a fake employer, set up memorial donations, took everything. Harper was silent for a while. Then you're going to expose her. It wasn't a question. I nodded. She has to pay for this. Harper leaned back, eyes thoughtful. Then we'll build a case, brick by brick. And we did. We hired a lawyer, Carter Leone, a relentless, sharp-eyed attorney with a reputation for tackling white-collar fraud. He reviewed the evidence and sat back with a slow whistle. This is the most elaborate familial grift I've ever seen, he said, and I've seen a lot. Can we take her down? He nodded, but it's going to be messy. He wasn't wrong. That week, Riley went on a local morning show. She sat there, hair curled, voice trembling, thanking donors for helping her survive the grief. She talked about how Tessa would have wanted the foundation to thrive. She even smiled when they showed my childhood photos. I watched the segment from Harper's couch, shaking. She's good, I whispered. Harper threw a pillow at the screen. Too good, Carter added, we have to act fast. He filed motions, sent cease and desist letters, petitioned to freeze her accounts under suspicion of fraud. He called the insurance company, the state attorney general, the media. The media came running. Because of course they did. It was the kind of story that sells, the girl who came back from the dead, literally. A few reporters camped outside Harper's house. I didn't talk to them. Not at first. But then I saw Riley give another interview, this time on national television. She was crying again, holding a photo of me from a scuba dive, saying my memory lives on. And that's when I snapped. I agreed to one interview. Just one. Live. I sat in front of the camera with Carter beside me, heart racing, fingers twitching. When the anchor asked, "What do you want the world to know?" I looked straight into the lens. And I said that I'm not a memory, I'm a person, I'm alive, and my sister tried to erase me for money. The clip went viral overnight. And the tide began to turn. Tips poured in, anonymous messages from people Riley had conned, ex-boyfriends, business partners, even a former roommate who claimed Riley once stole her identity to open a credit line. The story snowballed. The insurance company suspended the policy payout. The DA opened a criminal case. The public started asking questions. And Riley, for the first time, went silent. But silence didn't mean surrender. She lawyered up, hired a sleek corporate defense attorney from Atlanta who immediately filed to block our case, claimed I was unstable, paranoid, harboring delusions of persecution, said the real Tessa had died and I was an impersonator. I couldn't believe it. She was doubling down. Trying to erase me again. Carter was livid, she's going full gaslight. I'm ready, I said, let her try. The court date was set. March 9th. I remember staring at it on the calendar. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I went to the ocean. Just me, the wind and the waves. I walked into the water up to my waist, closed my eyes and whispered, I know who I am. Because the sea knew me. And so did I. I was Tessa Bledsoe. And I was done being buried. The courtroom was cold. Not just because of the air conditioning or the polished marble floors. It was a different kind of chill, the kind that settles in your bones when you realize the person across the aisle from you once held your baby photo and now calls you a fraud. Riley sat in a gray pantsuit that probably cost half the insurance money. Her hair was tied back neatly, no sign of the tears or trembling voice she wore so effortlessly on television. Her lawyer, a man named Stroud, whispered something to her and she gave a small, measured nod as if this was just another meeting, another day. As if she hadn't declared me dead. Carter leaned toward me. She's going to push hard on mental instability, try to throw doubt on your identity, your memory, even your sanity. I nodded, let her. He paused as if unsure if I was ready. Tessa, if this were anyone else, I'd say prepare for emotional damage, but I think you already lived it. I didn't answer. Because he was right. The hearing began. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp glasses and sharper instincts, read the case file aloud. The plaintiff, Ms. Tessa Bledsoe, alleges fraudulent declaration of death, identity theft, and misappropriation of financial and property assets by the defendant, Ms. Riley Bledsoe. Every word felt like slow, clear thunder. Stroud stood. He smiled as if we were in a debate club. Your Honor, my client acted in good faith. She was informed of her sister's death by a reliable source, an email from what appeared to be an official agency. She grieved, she followed procedure. And now, months later, this woman, who bears a striking resemblance to the deceased, has shown up, causing confusion and emotional harm. Confusion. Emotional harm. I almost laughed. But then he pulled out a manila folder and began to list anomalies. A brief gap in my digital footprint during the mission. A hairline difference in signature on my passport renewal. A slight shift in my accent after months abroad. This woman, he said slowly, could be anyone. Carter stood so fast his chair screeched. Objection, that's a theatrical accusation, not a legal argument. Sustained, the judge said, but her face was unreadable. Then it was my turn. I stood, walked to the front of the courtroom, and took a deep breath. This isn't a case about confusion, I said, it's about betrayal. I told them everything, not just the timeline, but the feeling of returning home to find my world dissolved, of walking through the front door of my life and realizing someone else was living in it. I showed them photos, timestamped from the mission, videos, emails, a recorded birthday message I'd sent to Mom, dated just weeks before Riley filed the certificate. I described our childhood, Riley's patterns, her scams, her half-truths that always turned into full lies. The courtroom was silent. Even Riley looked smaller in her chair now. Then came the turning point. Carter handed the judge a printed transcript of an email. It was from Riley's personal account. Subject line: confirmation, death cert received. Sent to herself, but forwarded mistakenly to a former client. Inside was the line, it's done. Once the payout clears, I'm out. No more Savannah, she never needed it anyway. The judge's brow furrowed. Stroud tried to object, claimed it was taken out of context. But the momentum had shifted. Carter spoke clearly, this wasn't grief, it was a performance, and this, he held up my passport, is not a lookalike, this is Tessa. The judge recessed for 15 minutes. I went to the restroom, looked in the mirror. For a moment, I didn't recognize myself. Not because I looked different, but because for the first time in my life, I saw myself without apology. I walked back into the courtroom with my head high. When the judge returned, she looked at me first. Ms. Bledsoe, the court finds compelling evidence that your identity is authentic and your rights have been violated. We are initiating proceedings to reinstate your legal status, reclaim misappropriated assets, and pursue criminal charges against the defendant. Riley didn't speak. She just stared at the floor. The gavel came down. I didn't cheer. Didn't cry. Just breathed. Because for the first time in months, the air felt mine. Carter turned to me, grinning, you just made legal history. I smiled back. But all I could think was, I'm not a ghost anymore. That night, I walked barefoot through Harper's backyard. The grass was damp, the stars were out. I stood under the magnolia tree and whispered, I'm still here. Because that was the truth of it. I was still here. And Riley, for all her lies, her power, her control, couldn't change that. She tried to erase me. But I wrote myself back. Word by word. Step by step. Life by life. And I was just getting started. 2 weeks after the ruling, Riley was arrested. No sirens, no drama, just 2 officers knocking on the door of her rental in Charleston, reading her the charges calmly as if they were telling her the weather. Fraud, identity theft, falsifying a death certificate, wire fraud, insurance fraud, conspiracy. 5 counts. Each one read like a nail in the coffin she tried to build for me. I didn't go to the arrest, I didn't need to. I had already seen her face, pale and tight-lipped, when the judge ruled in my favor. That was the moment she knew, and that was enough. But her world, it didn't collapse quietly. The media came back, of course, this time not with soft music and sad interviews but flashing headlines. Woman declared dead, returns to reclaim life, sister arrested in $600K insurance fraud scheme. They called me the ghost girl and the living lawsuit. I hated it. Because this wasn't a ghost story. It was my life. And it had been hijacked. Carter handled most of the press. I stayed quiet, partly because I needed peace, and partly because the emotions were so loud inside me I couldn't form coherent thoughts. Until the insurance company called. "We'd like you to come in," the rep said. "There's something you should see." The building was sterile, windowless, humming with fluorescent lights, the kind of place where truth feels like it gets filed into drawers and forgotten. But not today. They led me into a small conference room and set down a file. Inside, the original claim Riley submitted. Attached emails, forms, receipts. And a handwritten letter. From her. The first line read, "To whom it may concern, my sister always hated crowds." I read it. Every line. In her neat cursive, she painted a picture of me, the quiet marine biologist who avoided confrontation, who found peace in the sea and died doing what she loved. She described our bond, how close we were, how heartbroken she felt. There was even a line about our imaginary games as kids, how I used to pretend I was invisible. "I guess now," she wrote, "she finally is." The audacity. The cunning. The intimacy of the lie. I left the office shaking. Outside, the wind was sharp against my face, and I suddenly remembered being 8 years old, standing on our old porch, Riley daring me to jump off the edge of the railing. "You'll fly," she'd said. And I had believed her. Landed flat on my face, 2 chipped teeth, a scar on my knee that never went away. Riley always had a way of making you believe the unbelievable. But this time the fall was hers. And the scar would be public. The preliminary trial began in May. Riley pled not guilty, naturally, but the evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents. The fake company. The money trail from the life insurance policy straight into shell accounts and personal shopping sprees. She bought a car, paid off a condo, transferred funds into crypto wallets and offshore accounts. Her lawyer spun it as a grief-induced psychotic break. But grief doesn't create shell companies. And it sure doesn't script obituaries for the living. I testified on the second day. I spoke calmly, not with fire, I had none left for her, but with a quiet clarity. I told them about the coral reefs, about the research, about returning to a life I no longer recognized. I looked Riley in the eyes as I spoke. She didn't look away. She didn't cry either. I couldn't decide if that made her brave or hollow. By day 4, the prosecution had introduced a bombshell witness, Riley's ex-boyfriend Marcus. He took the stand, pale and fidgeting, but his testimony was damning. "She told me about the plan months before Tessa left," he said she was going to wait until she went off-grid, said no one would question it because Tessa always kept to herself. He sniffed. I didn't believe her, thought she was bluffing. The courtroom was silent. Then Marcus added, "She said if she could erase her sister, she'd finally have a clean slate, no more shadows." It hit me like a punch. Not just because of what it meant, but because part of me had always known. Riley didn't just want the money. She wanted the freedom. The courtroom became a blur after that. Lawyers, exhibits, audio clips, forensic experts. And then closing statements. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. Long enough to make my palms sweat, my chest tighten. But then they returned. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in prison, with eligibility for parole in 7. I didn't smile. Didn't celebrate. Because how do you celebrate your own sister going to prison? I walked out of that courtroom into the hot Savannah air and just stood there. Free. Technically. But also floating. Because here's the thing they don't tell you. When someone tries to erase you and fails, you don't just snap back into place. You rebuild. Brick by broken brick. And some days, you don't even know what pieces to use. A week later, I went back to my old property. The house was still there, empty, but mine again. The shutters were beige like before. I stood on the porch and touched the splintered wood, remembered painting it sky blue the summer I turned 25. I walked inside. It smelled like dust and silence. But it was mine. I opened the windows, let the light in. Stood in the middle of the living room and whispered. You tried, Riley. Then louder. But I'm still here. And this time I meant it with every part of me. The first night back in my own house felt like sleeping in someone else's dream. The floorboards creaked in all the same places, but the echo felt different, hollow. The kitchen cabinets were still labeled with the little stickers I'd used when organizing spices. My old teacup with the chipped rim was still there, tucked in the back of a drawer like it had been waiting. But something had changed. Not the house, me. Because once someone tries to write you out of your own life, even your reflection feels like a stranger. Still, I was determined to reclaim it. Not just the walls, but everything they stood for. So I made a list, the kind of list only someone who had come back from the dead would write. Call the university. Reclaim my research grant. Visit Mom's grave. Talk to Riley's daughter. Paint the porch blue again. Yes, Riley had a daughter. Her name was Layla, 6 years old, big brown eyes and a quiet kind of curiosity that reminded me of myself at that age. I hadn't seen her in over a year. And now that her mother was in prison, custody had fallen into a gray space. Her father, Riley's ex-husband, lived across the country and wasn't contesting guardianship. Layla was staying temporarily with Riley's best friend, Justine, the same woman who once told me, Riley's dramatic, but she'd never hurt family. Right. I called Justine. Asked if I could see her. There was a long pause before she said yes. We met at a park near the river, the same one where Riley and I used to ride bikes as kids. Layla was sitting on a bench, legs swinging, holding a stuffed seahorse. She looked up when I approached, blinked, then smiled shyly. I knelt beside her. Hey, sweetheart, I said, remember me? She nodded slowly. You were in the picture, the one Mommy had. I swallowed. Yeah, that's me. We sat in silence for a moment. Justine hovered nearby, pretending not to eavesdrop. Then Layla whispered, Mommy said you went to the sky. I looked at her, heartbreaking. She was wrong, I said gently. I went to the ocean, but I came back. Layla reached out and touched my hand. Did you see mermaids? I smiled, blinking fast, maybe one. She giggled. And in that moment, something inside me softened. She was just a child. Innocent. Untouched by the schemes of adults who should have protected her better. I promised Justine I'd help however I could, emotionally, financially, legally. Because Layla deserved the truth, and a future free of shadows. Later that week, I returned to the university. I stood outside the research lab, clutching my reinstated ID badge like it was a passport back into who I was. Professor Halvorsen met me at the door. He hugged me, no words, just a long, firm squeeze that said everything. Then he cleared his throat and said, Your desk is just how you left it. It was. Someone had moved in briefly, but they'd left a sticky note on the monitor that read, Reserved for the ghost girl. I smiled. The students were different, a little wary at first. Some whispered behind their notebooks. One even asked, Are you the one from the news? I nodded. Cool, he said wide-eyed. You died and came back like a science superhero. Not exactly. But I let him believe it. I spent the next few days organizing data, sorting through coral samples we'd collected, reconnecting with my team. Slowly the rhythm returned, the language of science, of curiosity, of collaboration. And for the first time in a long time, I felt useful. But the visit to Mom's grave was harder. She passed away 2 years before all this after a long battle with Parkinson. Riley had handled most of the funeral arrangements, which, in hindsight, made sense. She was already rehearsing the performance. The headstone was simple, just her name and the words. Still waters run deep. I knelt beside it and placed a single conch shell on the grass. "Hi, Mom," I whispered. "I'm sorry it took me so long." The wind rustled the trees, the sun filtered through the branches like stained glass. "I made it back and I'm okay, really." A pause. "Riley, not though. I wish I could tell you I hate her, but I don't. I'm just tired and maybe that's enough." I sat there for a while, listening to the silence. And I realized something. This wasn't the ending of a nightmare. It was the beginning of a reclamation. Back home, I dug out the old paint cans, laid out tarps, put on a playlist I used to love, soft acoustic songs that reminded me of before. And I painted the porch blue again. Stroke by stroke, layer by layer, until the color matched my memory. Until the world felt mine again. One evening, as I stood barefoot on that porch, watching the sky fade from gold to violet, I heard footsteps behind me. "Harper." She held up 2 glasses of sweet tea. "You did it," she said. I nodded, almost. "You're stronger than anyone I know." "I'm still figuring out who I am," I admitted. "That's okay," she said, handing me a glass. "You've got time, you earned it." We clinked our glasses and stood in silence. The wind was warm. The crickets had started their song. And somewhere inside me, the ache finally loosened its grip. I was no longer erased. No longer mourning a life stolen. I was writing it again. In real time. In my own voice. And no one, not even Riley, could take that from me. It started with a box in the attic. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just clearing out the final room Riley had touched. The attic had been her storage sanctuary, her way of keeping clutter out of sight but not out of mind. Dust clouded the air as I pulled the latch. The wooden steps groaned beneath me. I climbed slowly, flashlight in hand, expecting holiday ornaments or old college textbooks. Instead, I found a weathered cardboard box, taped shut but labeled in familiar handwriting. "Do not open, R." My breath hitched. I hesitated, fingers brushing over the faded black Sharpie. There was no lock, no seal, just Riley's last line of defense, a warning scribbled in ink like a ghost daring me not to trespass. But I opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Not addressed to anyone, just signed with an initial, some folded into small squares, some crumpled, others pristine, all written on the same stationery set I had gifted her when we were teenagers, white with pressed seafoam edges. I sat down right there on the attic floor, legs crossed, and pulled out the first. "T, I know you'll never read this, which is why I can say what I really feel." My hands trembled. She'd been writing to me. Over the course of years. Each letter was a window into her mind, scattered, stormy, sometimes spiteful, sometimes scared. In one, she raged. "You never needed me, you had the grades, the job, the life. I was always the second act in your perfect play." In another, she pleaded. "I didn't mean for things to go so far, I just wanted to matter, for once." And then buried at the bottom, a longer letter scribbled front and back. No date, no grading. Just a confessional. When I filed the certificate, I thought I'd feel powerful, but all I felt was small, like I had erased the only person who ever really knew me. I told myself it was survival, but it was fear. Fear that you'd never stop being the mirror I couldn't look into without flinching. I read it 3 times. The words weren't excuses. But they were truth. And truth, even when painful, has a strange way of soothing the scar it created. I sat in that attic for hours, reading everything. Some letters were half-finished, others tear-stained, a few ended mid-sentence. Together, they painted a picture of a woman unraveling, not just from greed or jealousy, but from years of living as a shadow in someone else's light. I didn't cry. Not then. But I felt something shift inside me, not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. And understanding is a quiet kind of healing. The next morning, I made a choice. I packed the letters into a new box, sealed it carefully, labeled it Layla when she's ready. Because whatever Riley had done, her daughter deserved to know her mother's full story, not just the crime, but the chaos that led to it. A few days later, I drove to the prison. Not to see Riley. To leave something behind. At the front desk, I handed over a manila envelope addressed to her. Inside, a photo of us as kids, sitting on the porch, popsicle-stained fingers and tangled hair. On the back, I'd written one sentence. "This is who we used to be. I hope one day you find her again." That night, I slept better than I had in months. But it wasn't the end. Because trauma doesn't vanish. It lingers like fog or the smell of something burnt long ago. It shows up when you least expect it. Like when the lights flickered during a storm and I thought, for a second, it might all vanish again. Or when I saw a woman in town with the same walk as Riley and froze mid-step. Or when Layla drew a family tree in school and asked if she could write my name under Aunt. "Of course," I said, "only if you want to." She nodded solemnly. Then added a heart beside my name. In August, the porch was finally done. I planted hydrangeas, replaced the wind chimes, bought a new rocking chair, one that didn't squeak. And then I hosted a dinner. Just a few friends, Harper, Carter, some colleagues from the university. There was laughter, music, clinking glasses. For the first time in forever, I felt present. Near the end of the night, Carter lined in. "You know, there's a book in this." I blinked. "What?" "Your story, the resurrection, the trial, the letters." I laughed. "Sounds like a psychological thriller." "Or a testimony," he said gently, "of what it means to rebuild." I didn't answer. But that night I sat by the window, pen in hand, and wrote one sentence in a notebook. She tried to erase me, but I became the ink. Maybe one day I'd tell it all. Maybe not. But either way, I had my voice again. And this time, no one could steal it. Fall settled in like a soft whisper, cool mornings, golden leaves spinning in lazy spirals, and a hush over the porch that felt like forgiveness. It had been nearly 6 months since Riley's sentencing. And I had changed. Not in the way people usually mean when they say that. I didn't cut my hair or get a tattoo or take a dramatic solo trip to find myself in some foreign city. No, I changed in quieter ways. I stopped apologizing when I didn't mean it. I started saying no without guilt. I reclaimed time like it was something sacred, because it was. But healing isn't a straight path. Some mornings I still woke with a weight in my chest, like grief wearing my body as a costume. Sometimes I dreamed I was underwater again, not swimming but sinking, hands reaching for light that never came. Those dreams didn't scare me. They reminded me I was alive. One Tuesday afternoon, I found myself standing in front of the town's community center. There was a flyer taped to the door, support group for families affected by fraud and betrayal. I don't know what made me walk in. Maybe curiosity, maybe loneliness. Maybe both. The room smelled like instant coffee and paper. There were only 5 other people, seated in a circle of mismatched chairs. A man with salt and pepper hair introduced himself. "Eli, my brother embezzled from our family business, wiped out our parents' retirement." A woman spoke next. "Denise, my best friend stole my identity, still gets credit card offers in my name." And so it went. When it was my turn, I hesitated. Then said quietly, "Tessa, my sister faked my death for insurance money." Silence. "Then Jesus," Eli muttered, "you win." Everyone laughed gently. I smiled. But I didn't tell the whole story, not yet. Just the edges. The soft pieces that could be spoken without bleeding. After the meeting, Denise walked with me to the parking lot. "You seem okay," she said. "I'm getting there." "I mean, you're here. I guess that counts for something." She paused. "You ever write about it?" "I've tried, mostly in my head." "Start there," she said. "Sometimes that's where the truth waits." She was right. So I started writing. Not a book, not yet. But letters to myself, to the girl I used to be, to the woman I was becoming. And one letter I couldn't bring myself to send, to Riley. It began, You broke me in ways I didn't think were possible, and yet somehow I still miss you. I sealed it in an envelope and tucked it into the same box as her attic letters. Let the past live beside the past. Layla came over every Saturday now. We baked cookies, painted rocks, watched nature documentaries. She liked to sit close, always touching a knee. A shoulder like proximity was her version of love. One evening, as she helped me mix dough, she said, "Do you think my mom misses me?" I didn't lie. I think she misses you every day. Layla nodded solemnly. Sometimes I miss her, even if she was mean. She wasn't always mean, I said, she just got lost. Layla looked up at me. You're not lost. And I realized she was right. I was. Not anymore. Later that night, after she'd fallen asleep on the couch, I stood on the porch and looked out into the dark. The stars blinked above the trees. The wind was cool and soft. I thought about who I had become, not despite Riley's betrayal, but because of it. Not just a survivor, but someone whole. Someone who could look into the mirror and see more than scars, see strength, resilience, softness. Saime. I used to think being erased meant disappearing. Now I know it just gave me room to rewrite everything. And this time, I'd write it the way it was always meant to be. With honesty, with courage, with heart, and with the fierce, unshakable truth that no one gets to decide your worth, not even blood. Especially not blood. The letter arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address. I almost didn't open it. I had just come in from the garden, dirt under my nails, sun still warm on my shoulders. Layla was inside watching cartoons, her giggle echoing faintly through the open window. The mailbox had been an afterthought. But when I saw the handwriting, that familiar looped scrawl, I knew. It was from Riley. I stood there on the porch, letter in one hand, heartbeat in the other. Then I opened it. It was short. Only 3 lines. I don't expect forgiveness. But I hope you find peace. Because I finally have. No signature. Just that. I reread it 3 times. My fingers trembled, not from anger, not even sadness, but from something stranger. Closure. The final puzzle piece of a life shattered and rebuilt. I didn't cry, not this time. I folded the letter, placed it in the same box with the others, her attic letters, the photo I'd sent, my unsent reply. All the fragments of a bond too broken to mend, but too real to throw away. And I sat on the edge of the porch, watching the sky darken. Across the street, the neighbors' kids rode bikes in looping circles. Somewhere nearby, wind chimes sang a soft lullaby. This world, my world, had kept spinning. And somehow I had learned to spin with it. That weekend, Layla and I visited the beach. It wasn't far, just a quiet stretch of coastline lined with sea oats and driftwood. I hadn't returned since the day the Coast Guard found me half conscious on a rescue boat, clutching a journal and the name of a sister who no longer claimed me. But this time I came back on my own terms. Layla ran ahead, chasing gulls and shouting with delight. I walked slowly, letting the tide kiss my feet. And I thought, this is the life she wanted to claim, the life she stole. But also, this is the life I took back. Every grain of sand beneath my feet, mine again. Every breath of salt air, mine again. I sat on a flat rock near the dunes and watched the water shimmer. Then I pulled out my notebook, the one with the battered corners and pages filled with half-told truths, and wrote the first sentence of what would become my memoir. My sister faked my death, but I am the one who came back to life. It poured out after that. Not as vengeance. As remembrance. As reclamation. In the following months, everything shifted. The essays were picked up by larger publications, then a podcast invited me on, then a small press offered a book deal. I called it Ghosted: What Survives After They Erase You. The day it hit shelves, I stood in the local bookstore and watched a woman pick up a copy, flip through it, and smile. She didn't know who I was. She didn't have to. Because the story was bigger than me now. It belonged to every person who'd ever been betrayed by someone they loved, every soul who'd been reduced to a file, a headline, a statistic, and still chose to rise. At the book launch, Harper stood beside me, proud as a sister in all the ways Riley never was. Carter came too, quieter, more reserved but steady. Even Eli and Denise from the support group showed up. I gave a small speech. I kept it simple. I'm not here because I'm brave, I said. I'm here because I refuse to stay buried, and if there's one thing I hope this book teaches anyone, it's that your story is yours to tell. No one else gets the final word, not even family. Applause followed, but it was the quiet after that stayed with me, the kind of stillness that feels like arrival. Afterward, Layla came up to the podium. She reached up, took my hand. "Can I tell people you're my aunt in real life?" she asked. "You already do," I smiled. "No, I mean like forever aunt." I knelt down. "Honey," I said, "you can call me anything you want as long as you know I'm not going anywhere." She nodded solemnly, then handed me a drawing, her and me holding hands under a blue sky. Riley was there too, far in the background, waving, not crying, just watching. "I drew Mommy too," she said. "I see that. I thought you might want her there, just a little." My throat tightened. "You're right," I said softly, "just a little. Life isn't a neat ending." There were still court hearings, still awkward conversations with people who didn't know what to say, still moments when I flinched at shadows of the past. But there was also sunlight. There was laughter in the kitchen, music on the porch, pages of words that no one else could ever erase again. And there was me. Alive. Present. Unwritten by no one but myself. So if you're listening, if someone has ever made you feel like your voice didn't matter, like your presence was optional, like your life could be rewritten without your permission, let me tell you something. You are not the silence they tried to leave behind. You are the storm that followed. You are the return. And no matter how hard they tried to bury you, you're still here. And that means everything.